I'm about to show you how I made this sample while only using stock plugins. No third-party VSTs, no one-shot kits, no guitar pedals. I'm also going to give you 5 easy steps to make crazy textures. Oh yeah, and at the end of this video, I'm going to show you where you could get the FLP, the mixer presets, the sample, the stems, the MIDIs, and also all of the audio files. Okay, let's get it. Okay, so first, we're going to start out with the instruments. Okay, so for this sample, I chose a BPM of 110. Now, first off, just about all the instruments I use came from this packs folder. Go to packs and then instruments. And from there, you should have every instrument that you need to make this kind of sample. So first, I started off with the grand piano, and then I played this. Pick a chord progression that has a little bit of space in it. This will help to create bounce and keep the listener's attention. Also, don't forget to strum your instruments and switch up the velocity to make it sound more real. Alright, so for the effects we have Humanizer to add that retro feel, Fruity Convolver on the bathroom preset, Fruity Parametric EQ on the radio preset, and then I turn the mix down a little bit, Fruity Phaser on the Aqua Bright preset, then I got Fruity Flanges on the default preset. I have another 2 EQs to add and remove some frequencies. And then I added a little bit of reverb to kind of create a room for my instrument. Now this is the default effect chain that I add on just about all the instruments. I start here and then I tweak a couple of things until I get it to sound the way that I want it to. Reusing effect chains is really good to help the sounds blend together. Now here's the piano with effects and a couple of chops. Alright, next up we have the Rhodes. Now I just have them playing the chords of the sample. One of the keys to making samples like this is layering your instruments. Now all of the effects are basically the same as the piano. I just added the Fruity Flanger on the swirly preset to add a little bit more texture. This is what it sounds like with the effects and the chops. Next up we have this gorgeous electric piano. Now this sounded so good, I played the chords and then even added a couple extra filler notes just to kind of fill in some of the gaps a little bit. These extra filler notes are going to be perfect for when it comes time to add textures later. For the effects, they're about all the same. I added a Fruity Phaser and put it on the Wish Wash preset. I added a Fruity Chorus and put it on the Fat Clean preset. And then I added a Hardcore Flanger. I turned the width and the speed all the way up and then I just adjusted the intensity to how I liked it. I also added a little bit of Lux Verb and this EQ. Now take a listen with the effects and the chops. Next up, we have one of my favorite guitar sounds, period. It's the jazz guitar, and I basically just have it strumming the chords. Okay, so for effects, I really just added a little bit of delay and kept everything the same. Here's how it sounds. To add on more layers, I added the oud choir. For this, I just layered the chords, added the usual effects, chopped it up, and then added a volume automation to make it swell. Now, next up, we can't forget about the bass. I used the classic 80 bass. I pretty much followed the root notes and added a couple of filler notes to add bounce. One of the cool things about using stock instruments is you could add slide notes. So I added this little slide note right here to make it sound a little bit more realistic. For the effects, I added all the usual plugins. I took off any phasers or flangers, and I added a little bit of reverb just to kind of put my bass in a room. And here's how that sounds. So for the perk loop, I found this DL Berry drum loop in the loops folder. I liked how it sounds, so I threw it in Fruity Slicer, chopped it up, and I came up with this. For the effects, I pretty much kept it the same, but I added Lux Verb on a thin plate preset just to give it a retro vibe. Then I added Fruity Compressor on a vintage preset just to kind of squash the perk loop and tuck it back in the mix. And then I added another EQ. So for the second half of the sample, I switched things up a little bit. I layered these three synths that I found in Harmor and Morphine. The first sound is Moonlight EP from Harmor. I basically just play the chords. And then the second sound is Rachel from Harmor, which sounds crazy. So I added a couple of filler notes with the chords. And then the third sound is Keeping It Simple. It's a pad from Morphine, but I processed all three sounds as one. And I used all the same plugins that I've been using this whole video. Here's how it sounds with effects. Now I'm gonna play the first part of the sample, but without any effects. If your sample already sounds good without effects, then adding effects should make it sound that much better. Now here it is with the effects. Now, honestly, I'd say that's a really solid start. All we need now is a couple of textures just to fill in some of the empty spaces. Hey, real quick, if you're getting anything out of this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel for even more helpful producer resources. All right, let's get back to it. All right, now for the fun part. Let's talk textures. Okay, first I'm gonna play the textures with the perk loop. Okay, now I'm about to give you 5 steps that you can use to make crazy textures. Okay, the first step is to render all your instruments. After you got all your instruments, just render them to audio files and try to stay organized. You can actually create extra workspace by creating a time marker, naming it, right-clicking it and selecting the start option, and then dragging it to the right. Once you do this, everything to the left will be extra workspace, and then everything to the right of the time marker is where your sample will actually start. If you want more tips and tricks like this, then check out the video on the top of your screen after this one. When you render your files, try making 2 or 3 extra copies of the whole sample and then also each individual sample. That way you have plenty of materials to make textures with. I would say when you're rendering your samples, leave out the perk loop because sometimes it could kind of get in the way. Okay, the second step is alter. Try pitching your samples up an octave, reversing your sounds, speeding them up, slowing them down, or even decreasing the sample rate. I would suggest decreasing your sample rate to anywhere around 2,000 or 4,000, and don't forget to hit that resample button. Now that you have all these weird versions of your samples, chop up the parts that sound kind of interesting and put them to the side. Next, we're gonna add effects. Once we have some chops that we like from the weird samples, we can run them through effects. You can add phasers, flangers, delays, fruity love filter, fruity granulizer, effector, vocal decks, or whatever you could get your hands on. Next up, we're gonna record it. You're gonna wanna record all the weird sounds that you have and then chop the parts that you wanna keep so that you could put them back into your sample as a texture. Now, the last step is experiment. Now, all these techniques are just tools. Try combining different steps, switching the order of the steps, or even repeating steps as many times as you want. This is how you develop your own distinct sound. Now that we got our textures and our sample, it's time for the arrangement. These kind of samples work really well because they're based on the fundamental technique called call and response, which will make your melody sound more interesting. If you want more information about call and response or other techniques to help you make better melodies, check out this video at the top of your screen. Like I said earlier in this video, make sure to leave a few pauses in between your samples just to keep the listener's attention. Layer instruments to make your sample sound more full, and try using different frequencies for different sounds in your sample. Keep in mind, you don't want your samples to be too busy. You want to give the listener one thing to focus on at a time. I would suggest switching things up a little bit and adding a second part or even a third part just for some variation. In the second part of my sample, I switched a few sounds and I added a guitar solo. And real quick, here's what I added to my master channel. Okay, so after I was done with the sample, I recorded the whole thing and I pitched it down 2 semitones. Changing the pitch can add a completely different vibe, and it also helps to blend the instruments together a little bit better, so I would definitely suggest trying this out. Okay, so you could watch this video and try to copy all the MIDI, all the effect chains, and all the different settings or whatever, or you could just cop the Paradigm sample pack. The Paradigm sample pack comes with the FLP, the effect chains, the full sample, the stems, the MIDI, and all the settings that I went over in this video. With the Paradigm sample pack, you can go through every detail of this sample, save all the presets, and learn to make samples just like this. Everything in this sample pack is 100% royalty free, so definitely go check it out after this video. So this sample started out with a chord progression. Now, if you don't know how to make a fire chord progression, then everything I talked about in this video is useless. If you need tips on how to make a fire chord progression, you can check this video out next. I'll see you over there.